This is the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. I've owned this for 12 months, and here's my review. Hello folks and welcome to Calibration Workshop. My name is AJ and today we are reviewing the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. This particular printer has got 2500 print hours on it, and it has been my workhorse for the last 12 months. I have thrown many materials at it and had very minimal issues, but let's get on with it. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth into the printer specs. However, we will start off with the initial setup. From unboxing to the very first print, which was obviously a Benchy, it took approximately 30 minutes, and that is including taking the AMS unit out of the printer. Now, if nothing else, the longest thing about the setup was actually the initial calibration that it runs through upon startup. Now, it is a largely automated setup that doesn't require you to do much. Now that we're printing, this printer is truly a set and forget kind of printer. Whether I'm sending a file straight from Bambu Studio or even the Bambu Handy app, more often than not, I send it, I forget it, it comes out nice and perfect. Very minimal issues. If any, it's mostly user error. But we'll get into that a little later. I will say, however, having some cleaning filament or a no clogger style tool will help when changing between certain filaments. So I found if I'm going from a high temp filament, like say polycarbonate, and switch it back to PLA, I definitely want a bit of extra help clearing out any residue left in the nozzle. I mean, particularly if you're going from polycarbonate where you're normally printing about 270, 280, and even for a filament change, it only goes to 250. So you may need to run some cleaning filament just to help get it out. Also, an AMS riser is going to come in handy, whether you want to add extra exhaust or even an LED strip like I have on mine with this relatively small riser. However, if you are adding an LED strip, you want to be careful that they are not too bright, as it can throw off the LiDAR when scanning the QR codes on the build plates. Now, my X1 Carbon came with the textured PEI sheet, which works remarkably well. I haven't had to use much adhesive at all, other than the occasional glue stick or magic glue. Even with TPU and ABS, I generally haven't had much issues. But glue stick or magic glue being on hand, it can't hurt. You can always get the SuperTack cool plate if you're printing with predominantly PLA or PETG, but they do stick really well, particularly with articulated prints. So just be warned, I do have a separate review on that as well. Thankfully, Bambu Lab have been improving on this recently with updates to Bambu Studio. Bear in mind, it is still experimental, but the X1 Carbon can retract the filament quite a bit before using the filament cutter. This will help remove only the molten filament. Also, this particular feature right here is enabled by default for Bambu Lab filaments, and it is also a filament by filament feature. So if you are using non-Bambu Lab filaments, you will want to check this out and see whether this is useful for you. Now to talk about some of the print failures that I've had. Now, most of them have been predominantly user error, but there have been a couple where it has been the fault of the machine, but they're more of an exception as opposed to the rule. My favorite non-user error has been filament getting clogged in the extruder, particularly heat creep. As a result, I've gotten really good at pulling apart the extrusion system, clearing the clog and reassembling it relatively quickly. So I can now do it with very minimal downtime. Okay, my biggest user error so far has actually been heat creep, which has caused several issues. I live in Australia and thankfully it's winter at the moment, but during summer it does get quite hot. So I will often have my door open along with a fan going. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. If you start having issues, open the damn door. I would remove the top as well, but I do have an AMS sitting there and I don't want to print another riser. The AI spaghetti detection is another point of contention for me. I have increased its sensitivity, but even then, sometimes it won't detect that there's a problem, and I often have to run to my printer to have a look for myself before cancelling because the spaghetti is outside the view of the camera. Okay, on the topic of repairability. For the most part, you can get spare parts directly from the Bambu Lab store. Even better is they've started allowing third-party sellers to also sell their parts, which makes it nice and easy, particularly if you've got said third party near you. And these parts are actually reasonably priced as well. So if I look at the hot end, you can get a full hot end, nearly $60. You can get varying parts like your silicone socks, so on and so forth, all reasonably priced. Props to Bambu Lab here, but the other thing is they also provide repair guides via their wiki as well as videos on YouTube. However, but the other thing is they repairing it once you have the parts is still a little bit tricky. And Orca Slicer. Both have got their pros and cons, like Bambu Studio having integration with MakerWorld. This is great as it allows you to quickly download a model directly from inside your slicer and then get right to printing. Compared to Orca Slicer where you don't quite have that integration, however you do have a somewhat better experience with quality of life improvements that Bambu Studio is improving on. Finally, the app, Bambu Handy. Initially, most of my printing was done through this app. Finding a model and sending it straight to the printer is amazing, especially if you don't need to modify anything. Monitoring the print via your mobile is also great, and you can do this through Bambu Studio or Orca Slicer, but if you're out and about, being able to have a look through the app is pretty handy. As such, you do get notifications should something go wrong, like spaghetti detection, etc. These are the kind of features that you would have previously had to pay for an external service like Octo Everywhere, but here in Bambu Handy, it's all free. You're not paying anything extra. Alrighty, so before we wrap up the video, we do have one more question to ask, and that is it worth getting the X1 Carbon in 2025? And realistically, the answer is no. Especially now with the H2S. Because at the end of the day, you now get, at least for 200 Australian dollars more, you get a bigger build plate, better lighting inside, so no need for a riser and an LED strip that I have to power separately. Superior filtration system including venting, so I don't have need for a bento box. Quick swap nozzle, so I'm not potentially damaging any components. It's a relatively quick process like with the A1. You get 3 cameras, including the chamber live view and the bird's eye camera. So already much better there, and ultimately a higher nozzle temperature of 350 degrees Celsius compared to the 300 you get on the X1. And you're getting all that for an extra $200 Australian. It's a no-brainer at that point. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a great printer. But is it worth buying in 2025? No. And that about does it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this review of the X1 Carbon. If you've got any thoughts, pop them down in the description. If you like what I do, give me a subscribe or even like the video. Thank you folks, and I'll see you next time.